I'm of the staunch opinion that men cannot be feminists.
I don't think I will have a problem with being called a male ally.
So what's the issue?
I'll have a problem with you thinking that I will never be a feminist.
Patriarchy makes you to beat my mom in front of me, and I'm just 5 years old.
You are
so
centering yourself in the violence of another person.
Do you think that allies of feminism are placed for feminism?
So your ideology is that trans women were always women right from the start. That is a fallacy. That's very wrong.
Why does me saying that you can't be a feminist translate to me hating me? Where does that come from?
But if you are an ally, you walk alongside women. If you are a feminist, you walk alongside women.
The criteria for feminism is that you're a woman.
Cis men can't be feminists. Should they be anti-feminists?
You agree that men can be women?
Yeah, I do.
Exactly. Those are lived experiences that are similar to women.
It's not the same thing.
Gay men have also always been a part of the feminist movement.
You cannot argue that.
Yes, they have. So whether or not you're white or black does not change that definition.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So my first claim is that cis men cannot be feminists, and this is essentially premised on lived experiences. As we all know, feminism is not something that you just argue for the fun of arguments. It's people's lived experiences, people's real lives, and how you interpret feminism based on where you come from, based on your environment, it differs. So I generally believe that, as a rule, generally, cis men cannot be feminists. You can be feminist allies, you can be pro-feminism, but you cannot call yourself a feminist because it takes away from the lived experiences of actual women. And not only does it do that, it usually ends up as cis men centering themselves in a movement that is not supposed to cater to like them or their needs. It is not for you to speak forward or to take charge of a movement that does not have, not that it doesn't have anything to do with you, a movement that doesn't cater to you. So that's essentially my first claim. All right.
Sure, sorry? Sure, do you think that privileged women from like white Western communities cannot be feminists because their experiences are different radically from the most oppressed women in the world?
No.
Why then?
They can be feminists, but obviously what their feminism focuses on and what our feminism focuses on as African women is usually very different. As African women, a lot of us are post-colonial feminists. A lot of us refer to ourselves as African feminists. For white women or people in the developed world, what they are focusing on, what they are looking at may be not completely different, but maybe far removed from our own reality. So currently in the US, while they are debating things like Roe v. Wade and surrogacy and trans women and all these things, these are arguments that also apply to Africa. But in Africa, we are still debating things that they've done like 50 years ago. We're talking about things like period poverty, talking about things like child marriage and all these other things. So that's why we say feminism is intersectional. It cuts across class, race, and gender.
This proves that there is a variety of experiences.
Of course.
But that cannot be a criteria for entry.
The criteria for feminism is that you're a woman because you do not have any lived experiences as a woman. So it is not your right to essentially tell us what we should or should not be doing. That's why you're a feminist ally. Your work as a feminist ally would be to refer to members of your own gender class.
What is the difference?
What
is the epistemic difference between an ally and being a feminist?
Language is the instrument of a revolution. Language is the instrument of activism. When you use certain languages, certain words, it sends a message that might be different from what you're actually intending to achieve. For example, when everybody was being liberal, when everybody was doing male feminists, that's when we saw people like Solomon Buchi come up, saw people calling themselves kings of feminism. We saw men essentially take it upon themselves to reprimand women, as opposed to educating their fellow men and then actually being useful by working.
By this logic as well. What the logic implies is that every woman is implicitly a feminist.
Should be a feminist, yes.
Experiences.
Yes.
This obviously doesn't apply categorically as well because certain women have those experiences and think feminism objectively is wrong.
Yeah, they might not call themselves feminists, but it is still their own right to say whether they want to be or they should not be feminists. But as a man, it is not now your position to tell us what we should do, what we should not do, or to center yourself in a movement that is not for you.
So
you don't have those lived experiences, so you cannot now come and then center yourself.
I think the question of lived experiences is invalid to the point where you can experience, you can have lived experiences by having your mother or your parent or your sisters experience abuse, and that ultimately might mean that you are empathetic towards abuse. So lived experiences
the fact that you're
have to
empathetic
be
does not make you an
internal
activist,
to you.
and this cuts across different forms of activism.
Yeah.
The fact that you're empathetic, for example, white people can be very, very empathetic when it comes to racism.
So I think the final question I will ask you then is if cis men can't be feminists, should they be anti-feminists? Because that's obviously what's the only available option for them.
That's
Based
not
on
the
the
only
narrative.
available option.
The
Like you said,
narrative,
you
the
can be
narrative is
feminist
that you can't be
allies, or you can be
feminist.
pro-feminism. Like that's not the only available option.
If you say that we are going to exclude you because you don't have lived
I didn't
experiences,
say that. I said you
then it means
can
that
call
you need to
yourself a
join. You need
feminist
to become
ally,
part
or
of
you
a
can say
group
you're
that
pro-feminist.
approximates to your experience. So you
That's
can't be
not
part of the
true.
manosphere. Like
That's not
be
true.
an Andrew State fan.
That's not
You
true.
should be a
If
fan
that's
of
all it takes for you to be an Andrew Tate fan, then you were never really.
no, I think that there is no epistemic, like principled reason for why people should be.
Alright, fine. We voted out. We voted out.
Sorry.
Can I pause this video, sir?
Yeah, I will say it. Don't worry. Thank you. All right. Hi. Thank you for being here. So I think that the problem is cis men might not be champions of feminists or feminism, but they can be feminists. What do you think about that?
I don't think they can be feminists.
Why?
I think there's a lot of deconstruction to do in terms of the patriarchy that cis men time and again have proven that they haven't worked on. Feminism is not a monolith. It's always changing, it's always growing, it's always evolving. There used to be a time, I remember quite clearly, as far back as I think within 2010 to 2018, where everybody was, we should all be feminists, men were calling themselves feminists and all of that. But as we go forward, it has become abundantly clear that it is a choice. Once something is not your reality, you have the choice. You have the luxury of saying whether you're going to be pro this thing or pro that thing. So we do not have to actually accommodate and say, oh, male feminists this, male feminists that, especially when they tend to center themselves in a struggle that is not their struggle.
Exactly.
When they tend to insult women, even women who are pick-me's, it is not a man's right to now come and insult women.
That's the
as
second
opposed to
problem.
Educating
The second
fellow
problem.
men.
The second problem is that you think that being a feminist means that you can decide what feminism is about. I don't think that's the case. Being
I
a
don't agree
feminist,
with you.
being a feminist doesn't mean that you get to decide that
I
this
do
is
not
what
agree
feminism
with
is all about. Why?
As someone who has lived experience, as someone whose entire life and work it is, you have, I wouldn't say the sole rights, because essentially there's no king of the feminists, there's no central figure, feminism is not a monolith. But when multiple people are saying the same thing, when a block of feminists have the same opinion, have the same reservation, then you have to listen to those people because essentially it is their movement at the end of the day. So as African feminists, I know, white feminists and people in the first world are a lot less, they're a lot less apathetic to male feminists. They embrace it. They feel like, okay, yes, they're part of us and all that. But we have to remember that where the patriarchy is a spectrum. Patriarchy in the US and patriarchy in Nigeria are not the same thing. There are some things that you look at, some things that you experience as a woman, and you just know that you can never actually fully trust a man, especially when he goes out of his way to call himself a feminist. And then by insisting that you want to be called a feminist as opposed to maybe a pro-feminist person or a male ally, it just goes to show that you care more about the title and pandering as opposed to doing the actual work.
I don't think it's about caring about the title. I think it's about caring about the integration. That's the most important thing.
No, it's not. Because we've had this debate several times before, and the main issue is always, even people that have never tweeted anything pro-feminism or pro-women before in their lives, the major problem is always, so if you are so pro-equality, why can't you? They don't want to do any actual work. They don't want to exercise any
That is
academic
another
work.
problem.
So you can't
I think there's a generalization of the fact that this is what people have done in the past. That means that all men will always be the same.
Doesn't mean that all men will always be the same. It just means that if you are really interested in doing the work and everything, you should know that coming into this, you are working alongside women. You are not working in front of women. You are not the one that is going to lead women into
Exactly,
salvation.
that's my problem.
exactly
My problem is that you think that being a feminist means you're always going to lead women. I don't think that's the case. But
a feminist is
lastly,
always going to lead women. That's just what it is.
no.
A feminist is going to lead the feminist revolution. That's just what
A
it
feminist is a feminist. You are a leader in your stance. What you are countering, what you
Not
are
one person. I'm
claiming
not talking about one person.
Exactly.
A feminist not as one person. A feminist as a body. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be
What
anybody
you
in particular.
imply is if you come in as a man, as a feminist, you get to decide what other feminists do. How is
What?
that the case?
Yeah, it's the case because a lot of time, I just gave the example of someone that called himself the king of feminism, and this one happened in my presence. A woman started a pad drive. She started a pad drive, started sharing pads, doing this, doing that. And when the opportunity came, obviously, being in Nigeria, government endorsements, everything. Another man who was assisting, who was essentially in the backdoor room, came to claim that it was his initiative all along. This is what he did, this is what that. And when it happens once, you can say, oh, coincidence. But when it becomes a recurring pattern, you have to take a couple of steps back.
I have a last question.
have to
If you
reevaluate.
believe that somebody who is a pro-feminist has the beautiful mindset about something supporting feminism, why is it not right to call them somebody who is really ascribed and contingently be a feminist?
As I told the previous speaker before you, at the end of the day, language is the instrument of revolution. What you call yourself matters just as much as how you put into action.
Exactly.
So if you are a man and you understand that, okay, it is not your place to speak to women in a certain way, regardless of what your politics are, you will not have a problem. That's even a little steps on this one. You will not have a problem being called.
Just takes analogy. You said cis men cannot be feminists. So they are probably men that are that want to be in the LGBTQIA stuff. And let me just give an example here from Ghana, where you can't be transgender or you can't be gay, but they have this ideology, they want to be maybe gay or transgender. Just because the government restricts them for doing that, or maybe they don't have the money to do the surgeries, become a transgender woman, do you then say they can't be feminists, even when they do have and buy into the ideology of feminism?
A trans woman will never call herself a cis man unless it's under duress. That's the first thing. And even though the LGBTQI community is criminalized heavily in Nigeria and Ghana, we still have trans feminists amongst us. So if for any reason you cannot come out of the closet as a trans woman and you choose to continue presenting as a cis man, I feel that someone like that would even understand and would not want to get into debate too much, and they will not insist on superimposing themselves on what's called feminist movement. They'll be more concerned with actual substantial work that they can do as opposed to doing any of these other things. I have experiences with what's called trans feminists. A couple of them, even before they transitioned, were friends while they were passing as male and everything. Until they made that transition, until they came out, they never outrightly called themselves feminists. They always called themselves, allies. They always said they were pro-feminism. They never ever called themselves male feminists. The reason why I even restricted it to cis men was specifically because this is a recurring pattern with cis men. It's an ideology that is recurring. They always want to speak over feminists. They always want to insult feminists as opposed to educating, again, your own class. It's a class struggle at the end of the day. And as an ally to any cause or any movement, if you're from the privileged part of things, it is your work to go back to your own class and educate those people, as opposed to, speaking down on other people, the people on the other side. That's essentially what it is.
So let me get this right. Cis men are men that are still men that don't
assign male at birth and still present as men.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can you say this? So, good afternoon. So, first of all, I will start by saying I am a cis man and I am feminist. So, I don't think you get to lay down the rules for who and who cannot be feminist.
And you don't get to lay down the rules for me either. So, what do we go for?
Okay. Where we go to is that feminism is a standard definition.
Okay.
Feminism is pushing for equal rights between men and women. Feminism is not women saying they want to be better than men or they want to do this
I
better
never
than
said
men.
that.
Okay, but feminism does not get to be defined by one woman. You mentioned that
It gets to be defined by several women, and several women have defined it over and over
that is
again.
what I am trying
That's
to
why
tell you.
it's so annoying.
Several women have not said that cis men cannot be feminists.
You can actually search it up.
We can look at the majority. Several majority of feminists have not said that men cannot be feminists.
So where did you get this fact from?
This is common logic.
It's common logic for me.
There are men.
Men cannot be feminists. You don't have the source.
Okay, so please, can you give me your definition of feminism?
Feminism is a struggle for equality of the sexes.
Okay, great. That's a very wonderful definition. Do you agree that the patriarchy affects men as well?
It does.
Okay, so why do you believe that men can be feminists?
Men cannot be feminists, as I've said again, because they do not have the lived experiences. If they want to dismantle the patriarchy, there are other ways, other methods of activism through which.
So are you saying that women that don't have the lived experiences or other women like you cannot
I
be
do not say
feminists?
that. Lived experiences vary. It's on a spectrum. The lived experiences I have as a black woman, a white woman does not have those lived experiences.
Okay.
So a white woman cannot come and tell us that she is an African feminist. That's
See,
essentially
there are
what it
different
is.
ideologies of feminism, right?
Yeah.
There's white feminism, black feminism, etc. But
There is.
feminism has one universal definition
It does not
that
have a
applies
universal
to
definition.
everybody.
It does not have
the
a universal
the
definition.
definition of feminism is equality of the sexes, as you just defined, right?
doesn't
So
have
whether
a
or not
universal
you're white or
definition.
black does not change that definition, right?
Like you said, there are
So
different-
whether
there are
or
different-
not,
there are different
yes,
parts
there are
of feminism.
sub-ideologies.
Yeah.
See, every ideology has a sub-ideology. There are
Of course.
sub-ideologies to this particular ideology, but that doesn't change the meaning of the original ideology.
Yeah.
Now, taking that original ideology and knowing that the patriarchy affects men, do you believe that there are not men that disagree with the patriarchy? And
Do I believe that
actively,
what?
do you believe that there are not men that disagree with the patriarchy?
There are not men that disagree with patriarchy.
Yeah.
There are men who
Do
disagree.
you
with the-
believe that they are not like the men that disagree with the patriarchy do not exist?
The men that disagree with the patriarchy do not exist?
Yes.
I believe there are men who disagree with the patriarchy.
Okay, so
It
why
still
can't
doesn't
they
make
be
them
feminists? Okay, so they
Because
can't.
again, the work
So
of-
by your definition,
Can I answer?
these men. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Again, the work of decolonizing themselves and deconstructing patriarchy, they have yet to do that completely to a reasonable extent, where it would be safe for a man to say, oh, he wants to be a male feminist. Again, like you said, feminism is not a monolith. There is no one definition of feminism. Obviously, for the point of academic debate, you can say equality of the sexes, all of this. I'm an intersectional feminist. Some other women are Marxist feminists. Some other women are liberal feminists. Liberal feminists are the ones who believe things like, oh, men can be feminists, all these things, all these other things. I do not. I'm of the staunch opinion and believe that men cannot be feminists. If you want to be a feminist so bad and you call yourself, why is it so important that you are referred to as the same title as people that have those lived experiences? And then you made a point about lived experiences. Obviously, we know lived experiences are not the same across board. That's why feminism is not a monolith.
Wow.
I'm not speaking to her. Just want to be a feminist. Right. Okay. So I think there is a semantic mischaracterization of what a feminist is, who a feminist activist is, and what it means to actually belong to an ideological movement. Because what feminism stands for essentially is an ideological movement. It doesn't necessarily translate to an identity, which requires certain social, physical, behavioral, communal characteristics in order to effectively exhibit and express their identity. So an ideological movement can be opted in and opted out simply at the superficial levels, simply by identifying the causalities, the moralities, the principal arguments within that particular ideology. And you don't necessarily need to have the lived experience, because just like she pointed out, the slippery slope there is that even women who do not belong to certain intersections and classes will not essentially be in a good position to favorably express those classes and intersections.
That's why white women don't call themselves African feminists.
Hold on. So the problem with your argument is that you are mixing a movement, an activity, or basically an activist movement, with its ideology, and both are incredibly separate. Like, people can opt into one without necessarily having to be at the forefront of the movement, right? So I could be a feminist, I could identify with the logic and the morality and the philosophies of the feminist movement without necessarily committing my resources. If you need to bring that disparity and the difference between opting into that ideology and expressing that ideology, you are essentially. Let me finish my statement. So if you need to bring that disparity here, then what you are trying to say is that every single person that opts into an ideology has to express that ideology in resources and in active movements on ground, and that has never been the global consensus.
I do believe we need to express. And again, for example, the way I told her again, feminism is not a monolith. Ideas change, people grow, and everything. There was a time where I was all for male feminist, pro-feminism, all these things. But as soon as reality starts to shift, everybody has to shift with them. There used to be a time where everybody was pro-ally, even amongst black people. They used to be allies with brown people. They used to form alliances, all of this. But when it becomes abundantly clear that those are who are supposed to be on your side, those are who are supposed to be pro your ideology, and making choices to flit in and flit out and take on those badges where it becomes of benefit to them, then even amongst us as a community, we have to agree that there is nothing like a male feminist. If you want to be a male ally, if you want to identify as pro-feminism, that's a different thing.
Okay, good day.
Hello.
So I want to ask, why do you want the benefits of 6 men, like what they offer? You want them as allies?
Benefits of what?
The benefit of having 6 men around the feminist movement. Why do you want their benefit without admitting them?
Why do LGBTQ plus members want allies without admitting people into their ranks? Why is the A in ally for asexual and not for ally?
So you're talking about lived experiences. So for instance, do you assume that that cis men don't entirely get to experience what this sort of discrimination looks like? For instance, no, unfortunately they do. So for instance, I'll give you an example. Male children are raised within families, right? They experience what our mothers go through. In fact, if you talk about
you don't
how
experience
patriarchy, for instance,
that's a very
when you talk about when you
do
talk
not
about
experience, you witness it. It's not done to you.
Okay, now let's look at it this way. Okay, let's look at it this way. Look at it this way.
You witness it.
I'm sure you've heard about trauma, right? You've heard about trauma. You've heard about trauma. So for instance, if for instance patriarchy makes you to beat my mom in front of me and I'm just 5 years old, you don't get to tell how that is going to impact on me.
You are
so the idea
that in the violence of another person, this violence another person experienced.
So you see, that's where the problem is.
You did not experience it. So you can't put yourself as far as the actual victim.
That's where the problem of this logic is.
Which is exactly why you are an ally and you are not a feminist.
No, unfortunately, if I have that problem, I then have the responsibility to try and solve it. For instance, if my mother gets to face that, and because of the relationship I share.
I just have one perspective on this. Yes. So I'm more concerned about the cis men part of things, because it seems you believe that trans women, that's X-men now.
Yeah, woman.
So do you think they share experiences with women?
Oh, they do.
So what such experiences? Can you give examples?
Catcalling, sexual harassment, sexual assault.
Like while they were men?
No, as when they start to present as women, obviously. That's where lived experiences come in. Socially, culturally, and in all the ways account. Once they start to transition, even before they transition, once you express any form of femininity, you begin to essentially experience some of the things that other women are experiencing. That's why for gay men, they call it femphobia, they don't call it misogyny, they call it femphobia. For trans women, it falls under trans misogyny because then they start to experience a very, very specific set of acts that only trans women relate to. Again, it's the same for the same reason. Cis women, we do not call ourselves trans activists, we call ourselves allies. Because the type of misogyny that trans women are subjected to is very different from us. It's not very, very different, but some of it is very, very specific to trans women. And so if it's not your reality, you cannot speak over them. You can't tell them what their experiences are, and you cannot tell them how to react to it. That's essentially what it is.
Okay. Well, so I would contend that at the point when a person becomes a trans woman, they haven't experienced anything per se, right?
You don't know that.
But you're assuming because no, they're man at first, right? And they become a trans woman.
Because even while presenting as male, even while presenting as male and everything, a lot of times they still I have a friend who's a trans woman. Even while she's passing, as male passing and everything, you can see the femphobia from a mile away. Like 3 women were walking, like 3 of us were walking, all women, all dressed up, going on the night and everything. But she was the one that was singled out because of the way she was walking. Oh, like this, like that. So, and in that particular
that's
moment,
a feminism.
hold on, it still is.
Homophobia.
In that particular moment, all of us know what it's like to be catcalled. Now she does too. She does as well. Meanwhile, when we're going out, 3 of us plus a trans woman and a man. Since he's there, they don't talk to any of us.
So femme presenting gay men can be feminists.
I don't agree with that, but I would take them before I take cis men. That's just what it is.
Can femme presenting gay men be feminists?
No.
They can't be feminists.
No.
Even though they experience all the same experiences.
They don't experience the exact same thing. There are still distinctions, even in that. Okay. The second claim is that trans women have to be included in feminism. So, as an intersectional feminist, I align myself with authors like Kimberly Crenshaw, who believe that misogyny and oppression cuts across class, gender, race, and I believe sociopolitical ideology. Now, trans women being involved in feminism is not a new issue. It's been there since Muriel Wollstonecraft. It's been there since Stonewall. All of that. Some of them have contributed very significantly to the feminist movement, and I believe that for us to progress significantly as feminists, we have to be trans inclusive, and we have to educate ourselves on what the experiences of trans women are. And then we also have to include them in our activism. We have to be allies to them as well. That's essentially what the thing is.
All right. Hi, Rennie. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
All right. So I agree with your first claim that cis men cannot be feminists.
Okay.
And I agree that lived experiences define what it means to be a woman and a feminist. The reason why I cannot call myself an LGBTQIA plus member is because as much as I love the movement, I relate with them, I am not part of them. So the most I can call myself is an ally. A trans woman has different lived experiences, right? From things like their healthcare, the type of misogyny they face, the kind of phobia that they experience from people, the kind of oppression. So while I agree that we can be allies to trans people, I do not believe they can comfortably call themselves a feminist. We can be allies to them as women, as just women, but we cannot include trans women in the feminist movement. They can be trans feminists. You mentioned trans feminism, you mentioned trans misogyny. There's a reason why the trans exists before the feminist, because one thing you also have to agree is one of the reasons why we say, cis men cannot be feminists is because no matter how much they relate with the movement, they still benefit from the patriarchy, they benefit from misogyny, and trans women have benefited from that system before they transition. So even though they are going through a different struggle now, that struggle is not on the same spectrum as feminism. I agree that there are some similarities, like, when they are women now, and there are some things they face, like catcalling, sexual assault, etc. But like you also mentioned, these things also exist on different spectrums sometimes than what we women experience. Even to the theme of healthcare, right? We face medical misogyny, but those people, even the extent of their healthcare is different because what they advocate for is completely different for what we women have to advocate for. Things like their medicine, etc., etc. So those problems exist for them. So why do you think they are feminists?
Trans women have every right to be feminists because even before they start passing, they start to experience what misogyny essentially is. Like you said, they experience a very specific subset of misogyny after passing. Even before passing, they start to experience that misogyny. Why do you speak this way? Why do you talk this way? Why do you walk this way? All of that. That's on one side. Secondly, I feel like a lot of cis women are buying into trans panic, which is essentially believing that trans women are here to speak over the issues that we're already facing. Trans women face a very specific subset of issues. Now, those issues are so closely linked with what we as cis women face that it does not make any logical sense to now try and put a distinction between them. You talked about health issues. Now, trans women also have issues with what's it called, obgyn. When they get vaginoplasties, when they get the inversions, all of that, they have issues with objects. So they are very, very fantastic allies when it comes to advocating for female healthcare, and they've been doing this from time immemorial. Now, what we're seeing with the advent of the internet age is a lot of misinformation is flying around and all of that. By your own admission, trans women also face misogyny. They face it in the prison system with sexual assault. They face being catcalled. They face, being looked at as less than. For example, if a trans woman, I beg your pardon, God, I can't speak English. Anyway, if a trans woman is walking down the street with all of us as girls and all of that, you are not going to be able to tell that this is a trans woman, so you direct a very specific portion of hate for this person. In that particular moment, it's all of you that are facing that hate together because you are perceived as women culturally and socially. You are perceived as women and you are expressed.
The problem is, even if I, as for example, a straight girl, have a lesbian friend and we're together, we're close, I can face some of the oppression she faces as a lesbian woman because they would assume that I'm a lesbian. It still doesn't make me a lesbian. I support her.
It makes you an ally. Perfect.
But,
The same way cis women are also allies to trans women.
Exactly. So trans women can be allies to the movement. We can be allies to the trans movement. It doesn't necessarily mean then trans women can then be part of the feminist movement as women.
They're already a part of the feminist movement because even from the very inception, from when feminism was first translated into academia, trans women were a huge part of it. We had women like Laverne Cox, we had women like...
We can also argue that gay men have also always been a part of the feminist movement.
You cannot argue that.
Yes, they have. Do you know why we always include the LGBTQIA plus as part of the feminist movement? Why we always advocate? Because gay men always face a kind of oppression because
they face femphobia.
Yes, exactly.
You're talking about femphobia. They face femphobia. That's all great, good, and wonderful and everything. At the end of the day, these are still male-identified people. When people talk, when people talk about
across,
I've always said that when people say that trans women talk about trans misogyny and all these things, they always acknowledge that while it is not all women go through the exact same type of oppression.
I agree.
So while everything still falls under the umbrella of feminism and all of that, not two women will come and tell you that we have the same struggle. It's for the same reason that lesbian women often say that straight women are weaklings, because we are still cavorting with our oppressors. So you can't now say because of that, cis women cannot be feminists. It's a very slippery slope. We start?
Okay, sorry, so I won't waste much time here because I just have one confusion.
Okay.
Your second claim contradicts your first claim.
How so?
If trans women should be included in feminism and cis men cannot be feminists, does it now mean that you believe in some sort of magic that, made them, they were cis men once? So
they were assigned male at birth.
They were cis men once. Okay, legally, they were assigned male at birth. But that means they were cis men once. Let's put it that way. So you believe that they had some sort of magic that transformed, that they inherited when they became trans, that suddenly made them, be able to be included in the feminist
The
movement.
magic you're talking about is lived experiences, and I have just said that. The moment you start passing as a woman, nobody's going to identify, nobody's going to separate you. Some of the misogyny that trans women are facing, even in sports, is being extended to cis women. From transvestigations to sexual discrimination, everything. It's still being extended to us.
Okay, but my point is simple logic. You say cis men cannot be feminists, but trans women were once cis men. So they were once. That is not the point. They were once.
They were assigned male at birth.
They were assigned male at birth means they were
cis. Are not the same thing.
It means they were cis men before they became
assigned male at birth.
Okay, so your ideology is that trans women were always women from the start.
They were assigned male at birth.
That is a fallacy. That is very wrong. That is very wrong. It's common sense. Trans women were men who decided to become women.
Sex and gender are not the same thing.
Sex and gender may not be the same thing.
They're not the same thing.
Sex and
gender. Do you
gender.
agree that they're not the same thing?
Yeah, hello.
All right.
So I think your definition is largely exclusionary
right? Because
Definition of what?
your definition of the barrier for entry into the movement, right? Because you say effeminate, okay, to you now, do you think effeminate men should be feminists or should
No.
be allowed? Why not? Because they suffer. Your
Because they
example
have the
of-
same issues I have with cis men, which is that they tend to center themselves when women are talking. Sometimes they tend to believe that maybe they are also women and they have the audacity to speak to women in a certain way, especially women that they convince are pick me. But at the end of the day, you are still male presenting. You do not get to talk to women.
But
in a certain way.
based on your analogy, right? Men who are women-like suffer similar experiences like catcalling. Like
Not
that's
the
what you
exact
said.
same, but similar experiences. Femphobia, yes, I did say that.
They suffer that, right?
Yes.
That's why they should be allowed into the movement, feminism. And
I
the
didn't,
same
I didn't say feminine should be allowed into feminism.
transgendered men should be allowed because they suffer similar experience. But people like
Trans men?
Chimamanda, trans women.
Okay.
But people like Chimamanda, for instance, have caught smoke for saying women are women. You have to be born biological as a woman because there are some experiences that are not replicable just by transforming.
Yeah, no,
right?
obviously.
Exactly.
And trans people have never claimed that cis women and trans women have the exact same struggles. You are quoting Chimamanda,
Yeah.
and then Chimamanda is somebody else who also does not agree that sex and gender are not the same thing.
Yeah, but the point is that your claims are contradictory. If you say cis men should not be allowed because they do not share the same experiences, there's no way on
I gave
earth.
3 different reasons
Okay.
why cis men should not be allowed. I said,
Okay.
aside not having the same lived experiences that women do,
Okay.
especially when they are very masculine presenting.
Yeah.
I also gave the tendency of cis men to center themselves in the movement and then try to take over that same movement and then try to exclude other women. I've also said when they do not do the work completely to deconstruct the patriarchy, to even to a reasonable extent, because it's almost impossible to do that. Those are the 3 reasons that I gave.
But
So for you to
this same-
center on
this
this
same
experience,
logic-
I've also said
But
that
this same
trans people don't
logic,
have the
this same
exact
logic can
experiences.
be applied to trans women,
Okay.
right? Because not all trans women, for instance, they do not automatically buy into feminism because they are trans women.
Cis women too do not automatically buy into feminism.
Cis men, you mean?
No, cis women too do not automatically buy into feminism. There are women who are
Then
not
why
feminists.
is that a barrier for entry?
Why is it a
If-
barrier for entry?
Like, why is experiences a barrier for entry?
No, we didn't even start this one.
I don't think it did. But I think the question that you pointed out earlier was that when cis men are feminists, the language of feminism changes in a way that benefits them. I think that's untrue for the very reason that you pointed out. We are skeptical of cis men involvement in feminism. It's unlikely that any cis man who claims to be
Are we talking about cis men?
No. I'm coming to the trans person point. What it means then is that they are unable to center themselves around the movement. With trans people, that intensifies the harms that women experience.
What harms?
For example, people who claim to be trans women having access to gendered women bathrooms and raping women inside those bathrooms, for example.
But are you aware that
Secondly
the highest statistics
Secondly
of
as well.
women that are raped is from people that they know, men that they know?
Yeah, but
Men do not need
we're
to
trying to
have
fix
women.
that problem. It's terrible when you make it worse and say you are part of our movement and we like you.
How's that making
but
it worse?
you're part of our movement and then you are also hurting women. But secondly as well, even if that's let's call it, it can happen for also cis men as well. We have gendered sports.
Okay.
The problem now with trans women being included in gendered sports, because obviously they experience the same thing as that we do. If the question is on lived experiences or the fact that they cannot overpower us, they are actually doing that.
Are you aware that 12 months of HRT will take away any perceived biological advantage? Are you aware?
It doesn't.
There are studies on it. 12 months of HRT. There are studies on it from the Women's Law
You have
Network
Hubad,
of US.
who was formerly a man,
The
taking a lot of medals from women in swimming. The Australian swimmer. The Australian swimmer, Hubad, the Australian swimmer that was forced.
This argument doesn't even fly for
I think
because when it comes to
when
sport,
it
a lot
comes
of people have biological advantage and they are not excluded for that reason.
No,
So what's your point?
definitely. The thing is that if you say that you are assigned men, or
even
if you're assigned male or assigned female,
weight class.
yeah,
Weight class, they're divided by weight class, all
exactly.
these things. So what
If the inclusion of trans women into the feminist movement, or
Okay.
in trans women, and the fact that you have trans women in general, just makes the problem worse.
How?
It's difficult for you to include them into the movement because you
How?
have to make specific trade-offs here. They are, in your opinion, they're the most oppressed.
What trade-offs are we making?
You have to make trade-offs as a movement. You also have to campaign for
What
them.
are the trade-offs that
You
you're
don't have.
making?
It's not like you have to campaign for them as a secondary factor. They become
What
part
are
of
the
the movement.
trade-offs?
You
They're
have
already
to-
part of the
by
movement.
what you
Trans
say.
women advocate for trans women, cis women advocate for cis women. What's the issue?
No, that's not advocacy. That's allyship. You're describing
Yeah,
allyship.
we're
What you're saying
allies to
here
trans women
is
and
that they have
trans
the
specific
same experience.
struggles.
But what I'm actually
Not the
trying to tell
exact
you,
same. I said two.
you said
I told
you said
people
they
that
have
they don't
the
have the
same.
exact same
You
experiences.
said one.
But they have the same
similar
umbrella,
experiences.
similar experiences.
But secondly,
Yeah,
also
same
they also have the same political tendency, which is the
Okay.
political tendency of cis men to disrupt the movement, which also trans women also have.
Okay. I'm back.
All right. So my question is, if a woman transgenders into a man, will they be called feminists?
Yes.
Why? Because
Because
now
it
they're
also has lived
experiencing
experiences.
they're experiencing the lived experience of
The
the man.
difference here is that even while a trans man is passing as female and everything, I know trans men who have been raped. I know trans men who have had abortions. I was recently at a workshop for pro-abortion movement, all these things, and there were at least 5 trans men there. They have these experiences that are not unique
Do
to
you
any other
agree
person.
that men can be raped?
Yeah, I do.
Exactly. Those are lived experiences that are similar to women.
It's not the same thing. It's not the exact
They are
same thing.
similar. You just said it
The fact
yourself.
that,
You said it
hold on, the
yourself.
fact that it's similar does not mean it's the same thing. The fact that it's similar does not mean it's the exact same thing. Men being raped and all these things, you can discuss that. That's again. That's why you need. That's patriarchy. That's why you need male allies. That's why you need men to talk about those sorts of things.
All right.
It does not now behoove a man to now come and center himself in the
That's
form of
the
feminism.
problem.
You can't talk about male rape under
Okay,
feminism.
okay, let's do
You have
that.
to talk about
Let's
independence.
assume. So, if you want to be a feminist, you have to advocate for feminism, right? That's the same thing that a male ally would do, right? So, by functionality, they are already feminists.
Functionality, but I still believe in sanctity of language. I still do not think you should call yourself a feminist.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that language is also important because it creates a barrier. It means that you are dividing yourself from the society.
It's not division. It's not a thing of knowing your face. It's not.
It is.
It's not
Exactly. It's
divisive.
division.
If you are a male ally and you genuinely and honestly have a problem with being called a male ally as opposed to being called a feminist, then you have a problem.
No, I don't have a problem.
I have
with
never
being-
called
I
myself
don't-
a trans
I
ally
don't
a day in
have-
my life.
I never have a problem. I don't think I will have a problem with being called a male ally.
So what's the
But I'll
issue?
have a problem with you thinking that I will never be a feminist.
Like,
That's the problem.
You
I
can
think
be
you
feminist
always
without
hate
calling
me.
yourself a feminist.
I think that's the thing. I think you will never
why
agree.
does me saying that you can't be a feminist translate into me hating you? Where
That's
does that
better.
come from?
Exactly.
Where's the next
It's an alienation. It's a division mechanism.
So
You say language is important.
because I said you're an
Language
ally
is not
and you should know your
important
place,
for unification.
you're working alongside, you're not working in front of women. How does that translate into hate?
But if you are an ally, you walk alongside women. If you are a feminist, you walk alongside women. You are functionally doing
As
the
a
same
feminist, you
thing.
are leading the movements. Regardless, as a
Nobody is
feminist,
leading the
hold on.
movement. Alright.
As a feminist, you are the face, whoever you are, as a woman, you are the face of women. And
Do you think that
As a
allies?
man-
Do you think that allies of feminism are face of feminism? Do you
what?
think so? Do you think that allies of feminism are the face of feminism? Do you think that
They have tried that on several locations. On several locations, I have mentioned at least 2 here and now. 2 occasions, and I told you that this is not born out of it's not born out of a vacuum.
Logic.
Anything that any position or any political position that anybody takes has to be born out of lived experiences. For me to say that I do not believe that men should call themselves feminists is because of things that we have seen, things that we have had to deal with over and over and over again. Maybe at some point when there's a significant reduction in level of discussion, maybe, but for now, no.
All right, thank you.
No, we're not done.
So one more. Can we restart?
Yeah, I'm trying to restart it.
Hold on, let me restart. Okay.
Okay, so you say that feminism, if you feminists are, of people that are part of feminist movement are through lived experiences.
Okay.
What do you quantify that defines that lived experiences? Is it gender discrimination?
Gender-based discrimination, yes.
Okay, so do you believe it's possible for somebody that is a cis man to experience gender-based discrimination?
If you
Like, for
experience
instance-
gender-based discrimination as a cis man, fighting for that would not be on the grounds of feminism. It
Okay,
would be
good.
another thing entirely.
Okay, so you believe that once biologically assigned males transition into women, they suddenly have those lived experiences.
Not suddenly. As I explained, I feel like again, a lot of people are buying into trans panic. Again, right from if somebody expresses femininity in any capacity whatsoever, they are targeted, they are made fun of. It increases once they start to pass, once they start to wear braids, once they start to do this, once they start to do that, once they start to call themselves outrightly trans women. Look at Area Scatter. It increases once they call themselves. Even Bobrisky. Everybody thought Bobrisky was fun and games. Everybody was laughing with her when she was, still, a cross dresser in quotes. The moment she started to call herself a trans woman, almost everything that women would suffer in terms of insults, in terms of trolling, the same words were applied to her. It was transferred. So I don't know if I got your question, but please go ahead.
Bobrisky has always been receiving hate, right? So the thing is, when he was a cross-dresser, even James Charles, that's not currently trans, is still constantly receiving hate, right, for being feminine, right? So the thing is, you agree that there are both feminine and masculine traits that exist in both humans.
Yes, of course.
Do you believe that men can have more feminine traits than their masculine traits?
It's possible.
Do you believe that those feminine traits can be used as an excuse to be discriminated against them by other men?
Men who have feminine traits?
Yes. Do you believe that those okay, so now that hate from other men is a translation of their hate towards women, which is basically what like feminism stands for, right? So do you agree that those people have those experiences
Of femphobia.
of gender discrimination, right?
Okay.
Because like femphobia is literally almost the same thing as gender discrimination. The reason
same
why,
thing, it's just a subset,
great.
yeah.
So now those people haven't have those lived experiences, but they are not trans. They just have feminine traits, right?
Okay.
They cannot be feminists, and
I
then
believe they can be
also
feminists, yeah.
they can be feminists, but they are not men. They are not women. Sorry.
I said they can't be feminists.
Oh, you believe they
can,
can't be
you can be a feminist ally, yeah, but I do not believe you should
All
be
right.
a
Secondly,
feminist.
homophobia and gender discrimination are two distinct things.
Yeah.
Just because someone suddenly is a woman, right? Which I'm an ally of feminist community. Nobody should drag me, right? Just because someone like transitions into a woman, right, and starts receiving. If first of all you can receive, whether you're a man or a woman or you transition or whatever, you receive hate when you are generally dressed as a woman. When you're present, great. Now, so when men cis or they transition into women, right? They're going to be receiving homophobia. They're not going to be receiving gender
You
discrimination.
can't say that is homophobia because it's a matter of their identity. You don't get to tell a person what they are.
But you are telling everybody what they are.
You don't get to tell a person what they are in terms of personal identity. Feminism is not the personal identity. It's a movement, it's an ideology. I can have my opinion, you can have your opinion. But you cannot have an opinion on someone's identity. You can't have an opinion on someone's sexuality. You can't have an opinion on someone's identity. Gender and sex are two distinct things. So when you say that you are a woman, you are doing this is what you're experiencing, all of that, automatically it becomes misogyny. That's just what it is. Especially because a lot of times when trans women are on the receiving end of misogyny, people do not even know that they're trans in the first place. When it becomes exaggerated and exaggerated is when it becomes things like sports and toilet use and bathroom use, and then those things still come back to bite cis women in the ass because now people want to be transinvestigating you. And then there are cis women who have been assigned female from birth, who have often been denied femininity, dark-skinned women, fat women who are not conventionally attractive. See how she be like man, see how she tall, see how she this, see how she that. That's an example of being denied femininity. That's a perfect example of
I
it.
believe that trans people should not be included in the feminist movement. They can be allies of the feminist movement, but they should have their own space because they face
They already have their own
completely
space.
different experiences.
There's no way
Their
on this
experience
planet
with my
that a
experience
trans
is
woman will speak over a cis woman and tell you that your own
that's
struggles
not
are
true.
irrelevant.
See, you make a lot of assumption, right? You assume that the moment someone becomes trans, they suddenly gain the experiences that we have, right?
They've been having those experiences.
Yes, but men have them too.
You're assuming that I think it is when you become trans. Before they even come out as trans, some of them have those experiences. If you've spoken,
Okay, so before they become trans, they can be feminists.
A lot of them will tell you that they are female allies. They will not say that they are feminists.
But what about the ones that do tell you that they are
before
feminists?
they come
Like,
out,
there is no general definition for everybody.
30 minutes left.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the third and final claim. Feminism and Abrahamic religions are fundamental conflicts.
Forever here.
Yeah, so I believe that as a feminist, if you are going to be religious, you have to admit a couple of dichotomies. You are going to have to admit, especially if you're religious, you're going to have to admit that when it comes to Abrahamic religions, that's Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the fundamental tenets and the fundamental instructions of those religions are not at par with feminism, and that one is going to have to suffer for the other. If one doesn't suffer for the other, you're going to have to cherry pick. So yeah, I feel like at the very basis of it, at the very foundation of it, Abrahamic religions and feminists theologies or feminist ideologies, I beg your pardon, are not at par.
The manuscript from Rome, ancient Greece, and Egypt that suggest that the definition we have for certain Abrahamic religions that exist today might be wrong, and they might be defined by European experts and people that discovered those manuscripts. That is why you would have several interpretations of what those things could be. From ancient Greece, Rome, ancient Italy to you have today. Several definitions of what could exist. You would also You would also agree that religion transcends over time, right? Which is why the practice you would have in the Roman Catholic era, when they had to kill people that were considered pagans, is not what you practice now. And even the so-called Holy Book backs that up. Do you then believe that there can be in the nearest future a feminist church?
That's not the question.
Okay.
They are fundamentally not at par. As it is today, you mentioned that religion transcends and changes over time. But as it is today, as we have the church, the mosque, and the temple today, as of today like this, they are not at par. That's my argument.
Yeah, but your claim
Okay.
is based on an objective definition, right?
Of what?
But that's what I'm saying.
The religions?
Exactly.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that there isn't, right? Because what you might believe to be the meaning of this thing might not truly be what it was about. So you deny people of faith based on an interpretation that you've accepted to be so in
An
your
interpretation
mind.
that I have accepted to be so. Okay, let's
Yeah.
start with the biggest church in the world and probably
Okay.
the first, the Roman Catholic Church.
Okay.
So today, women cannot be ordained. Women cannot be called to, what's it called? Hold on. That's the single authority on Catholicism. Yeah? That's the
Okay.
single authority. So anything that you, your personal opinion or your personal self-belief, is quite irrelevant because that's not the situation on ground. That's one. Judaism, as of today, let me give you a perfect example. Judaism, if you want to get divorced as an Orthodox Jew, it has to come from the husband. The husband has to be the one to divorce you. As a wife, you do not have the right to divorce. If your husband refuses to divorce you, you become Sean. I've forgotten what the word is, but essentially you become Sean. You can't move on with your life. all of
I'm
that.
very sorry.
Hold on. That's
No.
the
The reason
temple.
why is because I want to agree with you.
Hold on. Okay,
I want
that's
to
fine.
agree with everything you're saying.
Hold on. Then
Yeah.
finally, Islam. I'm a former
Okay.
Muslim myself.
All right.
The way the Quran is, Arabic to English, English to Arabic, is very strict. It's the same thing.
Okay.
What you inherit as a woman, you inherit half of whatever your brother is inheriting, regardless of whether you're older or not. So
Okay.
all of that is very fundamentally anti-feminism. So if you're going to be subscribing to any one of the religions, you're going to have to cherry pick. There's no two ways about it. It's either you cherry pick your religion or you cherry pick feminism. But you cannot deny that at the very basis of it all, there is a disconnect. between
No
those two.
problem.
That's all.
You're correct. Islam conflicts with feminism. Christianity also does. Islam is bad. Judaism is bad. Islam is bad.
Not say that to her.
No. I'm supporting your claim to say that they are conflicting. No, I'm taking it. No. Relax. If you support an idea, you must take it to length. It means that you must.
I was here first. Thank you.
This is the third time now.
After this, you go.
Why you always? You're suffering. There's people like you now.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah. So I would say a couple of things first. As as someone who is currently Christian and struggled with the idea of God being sexist for a while, I kind of get where you're coming from. But this is what I want to say. I think that for things like feminism, which got its definition largely from Mary Wollstonecraft and was actually given a term by a man. I'm not even going to go back to that about men not being feminists. Like feminism itself was termed by a man. But things like feminism, patriarchy, and all those things that came up way after the inception of religion, it becomes very problematic for me
Which
to
religion?
speak.
All three or just one?
Oh, the Abrahamic religions, of course.
All three.
When did patriarchy come up? You know, I know we call Abraham a patriarch, but like the definition of patriarchy itself, when did it come up?
I don't know. I have no clue.
It came up well after writing on most manuscripts. The point I'm trying to make is this: that if we say that religion and feminism, in no way, I know that there are differences between them or between the ideologies, but if you say that there's no way in which they can either coexist or live together, I think there's
I
a
said they're
problem.
fundamentally at odds. I said if you're going to have to do both of them, you're going to cherry pick. I didn't say there's no way to marry both of them. People do it all the time, but I do believe that the very fundamental and the basic principles of all three Abrahamic religions are at odds with feminism. That's
How
my claim.
are they fundamentally at odds? What's that fundamental in religion that is at odds with feminism?
So as we've agreed that religion is based on the equality of the sexes, it's activism for the basis of the sexes. Now, several provisions spanning from the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran make it not so, down to how religion is practiced. From inheritance to the right to divorce, to the right to be ordained, to the right to sit in church and all of that, to submitting to a husband, all of that is fundamentally at odds with what religion is. Because religion continues to push gender roles. You cannot accept that something is pushing gender roles and at the same time say that it is pro-feminism. It's not that. It's at odds.
Do the manuscripts push gender roles, or do people interpreting the manuscripts push gender roles?
The way religion is what's it called, is interpreted, is a function of whatever peak church or whatever peak rabbi, whatever peak mosque it is. In Islam, we have things called fatwa. That's the laws from Saudi Arabia. So there are some jurists, learned jurists and everything that sit and decide that this is what this means, this is what that means. They have the same in the Catholic Church, they have the same in the Orthodox Judaism. So anybody that comes after, this is English, anybody that comes after to say that, okay, you can interpret it this way and interpret it that person is a dissenting vote. That's not the popular vote. And at the end of the day, we are seeing a lot of wokeness, I think about wokeness going on, which I'm in support of, going on in churches, in the temples and in the mosques. But at the same time, if these things were very, very much, pro equality and pro all of this, we would not have this issue. Starting from the time of Paul, from wife submit to your husband and women should not stand before a church and all these things. You cannot argue those things because those are fundamental. All these are just innovations that are coming up in recent times because we want to be more liberal. But when you read the words for what they are very much not on par with feminism.
That's something I disagree with, right? Because on two levels, entire book of Leviticus, more often and often when you check them, you will see that there are a lot of places where there are protection laws for women specifically.
Like what?
All the okay, so for instance, on the part of cheating, there's this part about if you
time.
okay.
Okay, sorry. So I don't have much knowledge on Islam concerning this, but let me look at Christianity. So I would agree that if you look at it at face value, you can say Christianity is anti-feminist or does not fundamentally completely agree with feminism. But actually, that's totally wrong because when you look at how do I put, you gave a mention of Christianity and ancient Christianity, like the Catholic Church. You said women cannot be ordained.
Yes, so today.
There is a distinction we have to realize. There are roles, and it has nothing to do with superiority over another.
So what does it have to do with?
It has to do with roles. For example, listen, you cannot say that the fact that men cannot become nuns shows that there is misandry in the church. That is simple. A man can never be a nun.
Nuns cannot be a monk, but a woman cannot stand before the church either. So what's
women stand in front of the church? There is what we call interpretation. So the
Catholics stand, women Catholics just stand in front of the church.
Yes, they stand in front of the church to give sermons, but not as priests. No, that is the point I'm trying to make. There are roles. There are roles.
Sorry.
All right.
Do I?
Yeah. Okay, so I didn't want to get involved in this particular conversation because I'm a believer. But here's the issue, guys. Hold on. So, religion, right? You have a warped idea of how religious organizations and hierarchy and functional hierarchy works. So the roles in religion are functional in and of themselves, right? So just take religious organizations as companies, for example, the boss and people that work for them. Those are in ordinances and hierarchies that exist for functional purposes, but they don't necessarily translate to moralistic inequality. So when people say, with specific references to their roles within the church, that specific groups of people cannot occupy specific roles within that particular organization, they don't necessarily translate to moral inequality. Like,
can I have an example?
For example, when some churches say a lady cannot necessarily lead a particular group, that's essentially because that group has probably physical requirements for that role that preclude certain women. And then
certain women, not all women.
Essentially, that's a hypothetical instance. And then the other thing you need to understand about religion is that the interpretation of religious texts is subjected to several cultural underpinnings over time. So, and these cultural underpinnings are subjected to patriarchal vices. So you see, over time, when
patriarchal vices over time and all. So you are essentially leading back to my original point. That at the most fundamental, at the most basic level, the way religion was given and the way religion was brought.
So your contention, therefore, is that the interpretation of religion is conflicting with feminism, not necessarily the religion itself. Because how different, certain organizations could interpret religion differently. That is why in some churches, women can lead. Hold on. In some churches, a woman can lead. In other churches, a woman won't lead. By your logic, a church with a woman leading is not conflicting with feminism. But it doesn't make any sense. Do you understand? Like, the differential interpretation of religion itself doesn't necessarily imply that religion can have several varied relationships with feminism. A woman leading a church doesn't necessarily mean that church is not conflicted with feminism. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. So what differs is the interpretation of religious texts and how cultural values influence how religious texts are practiced within a specific region, not necessarily religion itself. Because at the heart of religion is the need for liberation against oppression. All these religions essentially believe that the oppressed should be liberated from their oppression, and that is fundamentally in consonance with the feminist ideology. These religions also believe in equality before God, like the idea of being created from the same source. Quran, for example, believe that men and women are created from a single soul. I'm giving you examples. Christianity believes that men and women are created from sand, the woman created from the man, for functional purposes only. And so these religious, the religious ideas there essentially imply that because men and women have specific functional values and oppressions.
But the
And
idea of functional values that is based on gender itself is a gender role, and that's just not on par with feminism.
no. You're not getting. I'm still trying to explain to you that the roles within religion are
Okay.
for functional purposes. They don't translate to moral inequality.
Okay, so what are the functions that a man can carry out as a bishop?
That
a
is
man
what
cannot carry
different
out?
cultures have interpreted over time, and that makes it look like religion is incompatible with feminism, but it isn't naturally.
Okay, so why is be submissive to your husbands now? How there are some hold on, because everything that everybody's explaining, everybody's bringing in these gray areas and everything. But at the end of the day, in all three books, in the Quran, in the Torah, and in the Bible, there are very blatant and wholehearted statements that let you know that
But we study
women and
scriptures,
men
we study scriptures in context.
are not
We
valued
always
the same
study
way.
scriptures in
We study
context.
scriptures because that's
Yes,
very good and
there are cultural
the
contexts to
context, if you as an individual choose to translate a context a certain type of way, the way you translate it is not the general way the world views it. Is that all? Okay.
So, personally, I think that the Bible, Quran, and all of those things are history books.
Okay.
That's what I see them as. And they were created based on historical precedents. So obviously, at the time they were written, that was the historical precedent at the time, right?
Yeah.
So when Paul was writing to like the different churches, Thessalonians and all of those, he was writing as a cultural misogynistic man that existed in that time.
But it made the Bible, did it not?
Please,
It made the Bible.
Will you listen to me, right? Now, when you say the fundamental idea of something, all you simply look at is the reason why that thing exists. Religion, as we know it in terms of Christianity, Islam, only have one goal: individual peace, and is subscribed to a power that is higher than you. Now, the practice is different for everyone, and it is subject to human interpretation, which is why Muslims worship in a different way that Christians worship, and there's even a clash on who they believe is the best. But at the end of the day, one thing you would always agree for Abrahamic religion, the only thing that is consistent across all of this religion is a God and your individual closeness to him, right? That is the only thing you will say is consistent.
You can't make that point of individual closeness because in all three books, your individual closeness, what is your right to, your path to righteousness and your path to sanctity and all those things depends on the roles that were assigned to you. There are places I believe in the Quran where women were cursed for maybe not being submissive. Then you have the Bible with its own like rules and regulations of what women should do, what women should not do, and then you have those in the Torah and all of that. At the end of the day, you can give this very broad overview that what is going for, it is peace, it is all of this. But if that were the case, we would not have very specific instructions on how to achieve those things.
Your claim
Yes.
is not that religion and feminists are completely antithetical. What
They are
you said
fundamentally incompatible.
fundamentally.
Yes, they are fundamentally
and that's why I
incompatible.
said, what
So
is the
more fundamental
fundamental
to Christianity than the
idea?
Bible? What is more fundamental?
No,
to
the
Christianity
Bible,
than the
and that is why even your pastors will tell you that when I preach to you in church, go back and do your quiet time and speak to your God, because He will give you the best interpretation of the Bible. Your imam will tell you do your 5 solats daily, because that's the best way you can speak to Allah. So it is always based on your individual practice, and that's why people will tell you.
Say individual practice when it comes to Islam, because one of the very first hadiths that we have in an Anawite correction is against bidah, against innovation.
That was just 2 minutes. Yes,
now 2 minutes.
Thank you. so what? Okay. So what you would agree with me is that, again, as I said, you like put Abrahamic religion as a whole. So we have to look them holistically. Now, what is consistent across these 3 religions?
Misogyny.
No, I disagree. What is consistent across this? Because the misogyny in all of these religions vary, right?
But it's still misogyny.
But you would say that the thing that is most consistent is the God, your personal relationship with Him, and the aim that you want to go to an afterlife. And it does not say that women cannot go to an afterlife or they would rank lower in an afterlife than another person.
It does. In the Quran, I think either the Quran or the Hadith, there's a specific provision that says a woman cannot make jannah if she's not submissive to her husband. That's one. The second one is in Judaism. So the third one.
But again, as I explained before, that these Bibles are historical books, right? At the end of what do they preach the most in current times? Your personal relationship with God, like that is what
preach that the most, because obviously times have changed, and when times change,
exactly, times have changed. So you agree that the fundamental core of religion.
No, you can't change things completely. These things are sparked wars before. You cannot completely say you want to overroot what is clear for everybody to see.
But then this argument can apply to everything. We might as well say that feminism doesn't work.
The reason it can apply to everything is because of the divinity factor in religion. Because there is a divinity factor, it is believed that God is perfect. God revealed His word perfectly. So everything that we are going to do, it has to follow this exactly. That's one of the reasons why the Catholic Church is very strict.
People's interpretation of God can differ.
It can differ. That's your individual capacity.
At the end of the day, do you think we should exclude religious women from feminism?
You can be religious. Yeah, no, you can be religious. You are very free to do that.
Okay. All right, I'm back. So you reference an hadith that says that as a man, as a woman, you cannot go to Jannah if you're not submissive to your woman.
If your husband is not here.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also an hadith that says as a man, your deen is not complete if you're not.
The one is half your deen. So did they say if you not? Funny enough, there's another hadith entirely that says as a man, if you cannot fast, if you cannot marry, you should fast. If you cannot fast, nothing for you. You would agree with me that the rules and regulations when it comes to women in Islam is a lot stricter than what it is for men. You would agree.
Right.
You cannot compare saying that if you do not be submissive to your husband, you go to hellfire with half of your deen marriage.
Because if your deen is not complete, if your deen is not complete, you don't go to Jannah. Simple.
You can't even say that if your deen is not complete, you don't go to Jannah. Because the very same hadith in another hadith and another collection also says it is not everybody that is going to get married. If you cannot get married when you are in person and everything, it shows that God had mercy towards them and cannot get married.
The same Anawi says that for your paradise is on the feet of your mother, which we expect.
That's for everybody. That's not for men.
And yes, exactly.
That's for everybody.
The point is, for every reference, historical reference or religious reference that says this is something you must do as a woman, there's already another historical reference that says this is what you must do as a man.
Okay.
That's it. So that means
it doesn't make it less misogynistic. Hold on, it doesn't make it less misogynistic. How? Because now women earn half when it comes to inheritance. We all know that women earn half of what men earn and all of that. Now, you would agree with me that fitting into the idea that a woman should always have a male protector, either her father, elder brother, or her wife, is taking autonomy away from women.
That's the same claim. In the same,
it's taking away autonomy from women, yes or no?
There's the same Anawi.
You can't say it's fundamentally unfeminist. You can't say that it's feminist.
I'm giving you an example. I'm giving mine. There's the same Anawi that says, if you want to respect someone, who do you expect? And they mention a female 3 times before a man. Correct? Correct or not?
Yes.
Exactly. So that means there's a respect for women, even though
your mother.
Women are men, mothers are men.
Is your mother 3 times?
Mothers are men.
No, your mother. Hold on. It's very contextual.
No, exactly. What makes a woman a mother? It's not the experience of a woman that makes her a mother.
So when he said mother, is it any random mother or your own mother?
Your own mother, obviously.
Your own mother. So how does that particular hadith now translate to cover all of Muslim women?
No, the same hadith doesn't say that if the same hadith for women doesn't translate to every other man. It translates to one particular individual. So
your husband.
So if exactly.
General rules are feminist. So what are you talking about?
The hadith say if you are not respectful for all men, you are going to go to hell.
It's not your husband.
It's the same thing.
It's not the same thing. We can't compare it. It's not the same thing.
Thank you so much, guys. That concludes this particular thing. I just
all the things.
I just conclude.
Conclude everything. Okay, so do I have to go over the 3 things?
No.
Just to wrap it up.
Yes.
Okay, so essentially, long story short, I'm an intersectional feminist, and I do not believe in feminism simplicity. I do not believe in just feminism as you are told. So those are what all my claims are from. You have to consider so many things. You have to consider religious feminists. You have to consider trans women, and you have to consider the impact of people who are not affected by what we are doing. You have to consider their activity on it. At the end of the day, purposes of debates like this serve not just to argue for argument's sake, because I genuinely don't like arguing. I enjoy my blog bottom a lot. But to let people understand that the people that are going through these things every day. These are people's lived experiences, these are people's real lives. And I'm hoping that in real life, we try to listen to one another more often, especially as it concerns personal opinions, personal experience, and all that. We try not to speak over people who are doing the actual work. So that's essentially it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.